Welcome to episode 5 of Reshaping Leicester Tigers. Of course, we have been through the club from top to bottom, from Peter and Andrea all the way to the bottom with 𝗟𝗧𝗧𝗩 last week. We're going to take a step back up the ladder in terms of importance this week. So take the compliment, David Wilks. I hope that's okay with you.
I thought you were going to say to a new low, but yeah, good.
Well, we'll see how we go. Ask me in an hour or so where we reach. We could reach lows between you and I.
I've only got 40 minutes, so.
Well, we'll cap it. That's fine. Right, Wilksy, let's be honest. You are a man who probably sits in the background a little bit in terms of the club's rugby program, and I would suggest quite happily sits in the background in terms of the rugby program.
Yeah, I'm happy in the background. I'm probably in the background, but in the middle of a lot of things behind the scenes, I'd say.
Well, very much so. That's what we're here to talk about. So before we get on to more Leicester Tigers stuff, I'm quite intrigued to talk about you. So bear with me. I'm going to ask the questions. Let's take a step back prior to Leicester Tigers. What was your journey to the club, to the current role as Academy Manager?
I was a player, played a lot of rugby in the Championship, as it was. Always coached, always enjoyed coaching from a pretty young age, 16, 17, and always did a bit of coaching. And worked for the RFU, worked as a CRC and development officer alongside part-time playing. Always kept an interest in that. Coached in schools, worked in schools, and then ended up getting a job with 𝗟𝗧𝗧𝗩, doing a bit of coaching, looking at the pathway there, and developing a program there in the academy, all the way through to what we call development squad, so 21-year-olds, and then got the opportunity to come to Leicester 6 years ago now, to continue that journey.
Time flies, eh? Time flies.
Definitely.
So Academy Manager, why not Academy Coach? Why not Academy Direct? What's the reason, and what is the job title in terms of what you do, if that makes sense?
I think the job title is actually probably an RFU term, if I'm honest. Manager is a term, but yeah, look, I do some coaching, sometimes more. This year I've done a lot of coaching, a lot of levels, because of different resource and different things happening. Other seasons I've done a lot less coaching and a lot more organisation, and that's probably where I see the role. Sometimes it's developing coaches, sometimes it's actually, look, under 15s on a certain day I haven't got a coach and I need to get down, and I enjoy that. I enjoy being involved at every level of the pathway. At the moment, obviously, it's a lot of money, a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape around COVID to get things going, which is needed, absolutely needed, but it takes up a lot of time. So yeah, it's pretty multifaceted, but I enjoy that. You know, some of the conversations and meetings you have on a daily basis are very, very varied, but that definitely keeps it interesting and engaging.
So when we talk about, that's, I guess, the broad level of what you do. What is your responsibility as the Academy Manager? Because, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, but you've had a lot of success in recent years. I think, is it three straight under-18 league titles? There's guys going up to the top team. You are there to obviously oversee the DPP, and we'll touch on the pathway as well, because you've said the word, I think, 4,000 times already in 10 minutes. But when we actually get to the point of what is your responsibility? What is your role? What's your kind of philosophy in terms of an Academy Manager is there to do what at a professional club?
My responsibility is to the players, is to make sure that the players get the very best development we can offer, get well looked after, get well coached, get treated well and fairly. We can't do that alone. So the other part of the responsibility is to our partners and relationships and schools and clubs and all those organisations that feed us, and with players and support us with facilities and education, and within the club as well. So making sure that there's those relationships up into the senior team, those relationships with the community department, and looking after the staff. There's actually a lot of staff that are engaged in academy programs, whether that's full time and directly every day, or vicariously through other parts of the club like yourself, and have a lighter touch. But yeah, it's I suppose more in relationships and making sure that we have enough resource, and we're pulling all those things in that direction, and that direction is getting the very, very best, highest potential players into that first team squad and playing regularly in the first team.
Are you, and I might be going off script slightly, but are you essentially saying that while you've got the Leicester Tigers way, a lot of what you're doing has to, I guess, adhere and fit into a lot of what schools are doing, what the RFU sets as guidelines, because you are dealing with under 18s predominantly, aren't you? That it is, yes, there are guys who, I guess, graduate from academy rugby and stay in the system, maybe not yet into senior squads and so forth, but you are adhering to a lot more guidelines than maybe a senior coach is with his professional players in every day.
Yeah, if you look, it's a totally different environment and a totally different probably set of values from somebody who's entering their first session out of a club environment at 14, 15, 16, and somebody who's going into that high-end performance environment at 19, 20, and the sort of the scale of behaviours and learning through that all needs managing. There's a lot of people involved in that, not just myself, parents, schools, other coaches, other representative teams that will play for along the way. So it's navigating that, I suppose, is the pathway, is navigating all of those situations, all those scenarios, all of those games, all of that training, and try and navigate that and actually come out at the end with a sane, well-rounded human being who can still play rugby at the highest level as well.
You talk about, say, jump ahead then, because I wanted to talk about this a little bit. How much of your focus is actually on, it sounds silly, but making sure they're not too obsessed with rugby? Because I would imagine that when a kid gets picked, whether he's 15, 16 in the Leicester Tigers Academy, that's, how do you keep their feet on the ground that, yeah, okay, look, it's great, you're on the path, you're on the ladder, but you haven't made it. You've got to now work. The work now begins. How do you make sure they're not thinking, I'm a rugby player, don't worry about school, I don't need to do my maths homework, I don't need to go in tomorrow, I'm just going to rest. I've seen 𝗟𝗧𝗧𝗩 at the training ground, he has ice baths and days off and all this kind of thing. How do you keep a 16, 17-year-old kid focused on school and look, having a social life as well, having a life outside of being obsessed with rugby?
Yeah, look, it's a balance. The one thing is that we want them to have very, very high aspirations, because if we don't promote that, then we're not going to get that. There has to be balance. So yeah, education plays a huge part in that. I think the way we structure the program, actually, they don't get a lot at 16. We don't give them loads of kit and loads of exposure to everything. It's a drip feed. You get more and more as you come through. And I think with 𝗟𝗧𝗧𝗩 and the school teachers around them, definitely trying to push having educational backup. So a lot of the players in that senior squad now are actually full time at university as well, and it's great. I always think that those boys that are just into rugby get very boring very quickly. You've got to have something outside of that. You've got to have other interests, and it makes you actually gives you longevity in the game, isn't it? So yeah, look, it's a balance. It's a balance between making sure they are really, really devoted and ambitious and want to get to the professional end with that backup plan, if you like. I don't like to call it a backup plan; it's just a plan.
Yeah.
That they've got other interests alongside to support their rugby, so they have a break from training, have a break from thinking about rugby. Yeah.
Do you find those kids that do have the ability to switch off and be something else to something else probably go further in some ways?
I always think I like those players that appreciate coming in every day and that appreciate what they're in, because it's not sometimes it's not absolutely everything. More some of those boys, it's a break from kids, but yeah, that have interests that you can talk about that's not just rugby. And I think that's really healthy. It's really healthy that rugby is something they do alongside other interests, and it might be pretty consuming for large parts of their time. But yeah, you've got to have a life outside of rugby.
So let's move on to that pathway, and we will. I mean, it's probably something to go back to in terms of life away from it, but the pandemic's obviously played a role in terms of kids probably being more obsessed with rugby or being bouncing around different ways of thinking it. But pathway specific. Oh yeah,
it's played a big part in being a really welcome, not distraction, but engagement. Yeah. You know, we've found that, you know, players have, when we've managed to get sessions on, that it's been you know, really, really welcome. And sometimes it would have been easier not to put sessions on, and probably safer not to put sessions on, but actually very, very appreciated by families, parents, players, that we've got through all the red tape and we've gone through all the measures and it's like one session we'll have to train in small groups for maybe an hour once a week, but actually we've made that happen, and it's actually been really worthwhile in terms of well-being, getting that session when certain parts of the year where there's very little else going on and they're stuck in their rooms, or they're stuck in school, not able to do much else.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously without the ability for a 16, 17-year-old to run around and absolutely wallop their mate that they miss, I would imagine quite a lot. And we'll go there eventually. Right. Pathway. Talk to me about it, because we had this chat earlier off camera, if you will, but in football over here, especially, you see these kids signing up to Man United at age 7, age 8. That's not something rugby does. You aren't identifying a kid at 8 years old and going, he's the next Leicester Tigers inside centre. Now, yes, range of reasons. They body shapes in football, you know, without being rude, a lot of footballers kind of look like teenagers at times, but you've got to kind of grow into your game in rugby, don't you, specifically? You're not this, and I guess it goes back to your point about them having that balance. This is about them not becoming a professional rugby player too soon, isn't it? That's why there is a pathway in place.
Yeah, and look, rugby is a sport for later developers. Is, you know, you show me a Premiership player at 8 years old. I mean, what do they look like? How would you distinguish him from another 8-year-old boy, or actually somebody who's going to play in the Premiership who isn't playing rugby at 8? So look, we definitely leave it, and we're leaving it to sort of 15, 16 to really start sort of making decisions on players when they look a little bit closer to what they might look like as a 21-year-old. So
I think you've got the situation too of Tom Youngs, right? Let's talk about Tom, who came through and even got on the pathway and actually broke into professionalism as an inside centre, having played wing, outside centre, and he becomes a Premiership winning British Lion hooker. It's a game that really, you're never really out of it. Even if you take the bumps and you take the bruises along the way and you might not make that team, you're never really out of the game, are you?
No, and look, something that, you know, Tom Youngs has an abundance is his mentality for rugby. His sort of warrior mentality, his fight on the pitch. He works incredibly hard. The stuff he does for the team, and those kind of elements are quite interesting and hard to pick out. Like hard to pick out from a normal training session and in a group of kids. And so we're constantly challenging coaches and challenging the pathway and the way we do things. To how do we expose some of those mental behaviours, those characteristics of players that, hey, like Tom Youngs might not be the biggest, might not be perfectly suited for centre, and actually might not be perfectly suited for hooker, but he's going to find a way.
Yeah,
he's going to find a way to work incredibly hard to find his edge in the game and be really successful. And so that's the part to it, that we're yes looking for good rugby players, but actually there's a lot of things we'll do within the pathway to challenge and expose some of those behaviours in players that are really needed to be a top professional player.
When we talk about the pathway, the phrase, or I guess the letters, if you will, DPP, come up all the time. So I'll let you explain what the DPP is, because we say it a lot, and honestly, at times people probably think, what the hell is that? Well, it's just 3 letters.
It's exactly the same as the PDD and the DPD and every acronym that people mistake it or get it confused. Look, developing player program, again, an RFU term that is the same across the country. Where we have groups of under 15s and under 16 players, at four regional centres. Those guys are selected from club and predominantly club and school environments. I like to touch it first, again, giving them some stretch opportunities over and above the rugby that they get regularly at school and club. That through coaching, through development, through some selection and events, we gradually narrow the focus down to 4 smaller groups at under 16s who take part in more of a playing program. From that playing program, we select some players to be part of the under 17s academy program, and the counties or CBs take up the rest into their under 17s, under 18s playing program. So it's quite a starts quite wide, but actually everybody finds or should find a playing program, a pathway at the end of that sort of DPP system.
And who's coaching the DPP? Is that you are going out to each of those, or is it, okay, Matt Smith and Tom Harrison are currently with the senior squad, but are they going out doing it when they were academy coaches? Who's doing that coaching?
To be fair, Matt and Tom both coached under 16s at different venues the last couple of years. Greg Mannion has been leading that program for a couple of years. So he would lead and manage a lot of the coaching, but we'd also have 4 or 5 regular volunteer coaches at each centre with each age group, who are those aspiring club coaches, school teachers, whole variety of guys who as part of their I suppose engagement in DPP program, get coach development. We'll bring them down to Welford Road. We'll do some CPD with them and continually try to develop them. And quite often they will go on to lead in county teams, representative teams, and be involved in some of the school programs as well. So that's It takes, as I say, it can't just be. It would be a pretty limited system if it was just me coaching every DPP age group every time. They wouldn't get much contact time either. But it's we use a lot of coaches on the ground, and we're very, very grateful for their time and input.
So we talk about the academy is obviously talked about as a production line in many senses, without being too blunt. But your George Fords, your Tom Youngs, Ben Youngs, spade to spade, Manu Tuolangi, there's various players that have come through the club, Freddie Stewart, JVP these days. It's also a production line of coaches. So correct me if I'm wrong, but in recent years in particular, Anthony Allen, Brett Deacon, Matt Smith, Tom Harrison, these guys have all worked in some capacity with the Leicester Tigers, DPP and Academy, haven't they?
Yeah, all those guys you just mentioned have been lead coach of the under 18 group at some point. Well, actually for long periods. It's not just one point. So Anthony was doing it for 2.5 years. Got an opportunity with the first team. Got an opportunity with Coventry. Same Brett. Literally overnight was meant to be. Was leading the academy group, and then parachuted into the first team and stuck there ever since. Quite rightly. Same. Look, to be fair, I think pretty proud of the way some of the strength and conditioners and physio staff have worked really hard and bought into the ethos of the club, but developed within the club. Certainly on the medical side, kind of a lot of the promotion of personnel has been from within, which is great. Don't want to be kind of a stepping stone necessarily for staff, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? That as staff get more qualified and more able and more experienced, they look sometimes beyond those academy roles, quite rightly.
Is that something, and I mean, it's maybe personal for you, but you seem to be the consistent one there. Is your role something you very much enjoy and see yourself doing long term, or are you someone who feels, yourself, do you want to go on and do it at a higher?
I think that my role in that is helping those guys develop and supporting those guys to develop. So, Anthony didn't, to be fair to Anthony, when he kind of rocked up, literally stopped playing our coach.
Yeah.
But actually, I suppose it's my job then to make sure that those players get every ounce of Anthony Allen's knowledge and expertise delivered to them. My job with Anthony is to make sure that he can put that in the right messages in the right way, and the same with Brett and Tom and Matt have done a great job as well recently. So yeah, look, I see that as that's what I enjoy doing, developing those people to develop the players, so that ultimately the club benefits.
You mentioned the schools, and I'm going to start with a very controversial question, if I can. Rugby is seen to be the public school boy, or private school boy, whatever you want to call it, that element of you guys only pick from those specific schools that have nice blazers and old boys, and there's former Tigers running rugby programs, and most of those schools have more money than some of the premiership clubs. But let's be honest, is that true of rugby? Is it true that Leicester Tigers, because you said yourself then, you're looking DPP selection wise at clubs now? Schools is that something where these guys maybe move into those schools in terms of partnerships with clubs? But do you understand, I guess, why people think that of rugby, and do you think it's true?
Yeah, I could definitely understand the perception. And look, I think it's different around in different areas of the country.
Yeah,
I think certainly around the East Midlands, rugby union is a club-based sport. At the grassroots level, it's a club-based sport, and we've got brilliant clubs. We've got brilliant junior clubs all around the region. We've got some fantastic schools playing rugby, high schools. It's I think it's tougher now for state schools. There's playing rugby. Certainly, a lot of that. The clubs are picking up a lot of that space, and then the independent schools that play. I think we're trying to strike that balance. So yeah, certainly there are, and some of our partner schools select and offer opportunities to players out of the state sector for sixth form, and that just they are talented boys that have fantastic opportunity within those schools to get well educated and get a really good. Get rugby development, but equally we have very strong partnership with Brooksby Melton College that offers a different form of education, and we are I think really rivaling the opportunity, certainly from a rugby point of view, in a college setting as well. So I'd like to think that it's pretty balanced. I think I don't think one takes over from another. I think there's different opportunities out there, and some fantastic sort of rugby playing environments. across all sectors, across all areas. I don't think it's dominated by one. I think it's pretty well shared at the moment, and you see that if you look at the players that are involved in the academy teams and coming through. There's a really good split in there. There's a really good balance to I suppose, lads come from all sorts of clubs in all corners of the region, which is great as well. You know, we map out exactly what clubs they've come from originally, which is really interesting. So we'd be wrong if they all came from one area, then we probably wouldn't be doing a very good job. But it's great to see kind of come in, you know, right in the forest corner of Norfolk to Scunthorpe and right out sort of Walsall areas. You know, every single corner of the region is what we want to get players from, and then coming through different sort of networks of schools and education as well.
So you mentioned Brooksby. Take me back around 18 months ago at Brooksby, and the coach is a young guy called Tom Harrison, and the kind of star player is a bloke called George Martin. Now, one's just become an international for the first time. Brooksby's, I guess, had one through in terms of the program, and the other is a premiership scrum coach. Is that for you, I guess, personally, from a pride point of view? And look, let's be honest, Scott Clark, who's obviously we spoke to here, heads up the community department. There's a huge involvement with the community department and Brooksby as well, the club as a whole. But from your perspective, you look at those two in particular and you think, you know what, 2 years ago, we probably didn't foresee this. And it's a nice little tick of approval that things are going in the right direction.
Definitely that. I think, you could sort of, take sort of the credit where it's due. I think it sort of certainly signs that it's going in the right direction. I
mean, Tom takes all the credit for George Martin going on to being international. That's what Tom tells everyone. It's him. I made him who he is today.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If I had, George has done really well, and matured and maturing very well. It's all happened very quickly.
Only 19. He's playing international rugby. There's sometimes surprising elements to when you see his age up against his name.
Yeah, definitely. And look, everyone's pretty sort of proud of the way he's conducted himself and rise. It's the challenge. Look, and again, you asked earlier about what's your role around that. Well, my role is probably firmly to remind George to keep his feet on the ground, and the same with Tom every day. Is that it's still 19-year-old George to me and to Tom and most people around the club, and that's probably my role, is just to ensure that look, his feet are kept on the ground as a 19-year-old, but actually other people understand that he's still just a 19-year-old, and let's manage that expectation and expectation from George. But yeah, look, it's credit to the hard work of those two as well. It's not, if you take Tom, it's not by chance he's just thrown into coach scrum. Look, he's an absolute scrum nose. He's diligent. He works incredibly hard and has done for years. It's not an overnight thing that suddenly he goes and does it. If you watch any kind of session back of a scrum session over the last couple of years at Oval Park or Watford Road, you'll probably see Tom hiding in the background with his notebook out. He has a network of some of the best scrum coaches in the world that he rings up, Zooms, asks questions of on a weekly, monthly basis. So it's not actually a surprise. It's a great opportunity, but is it a surprise? No, it's thoroughly deserved.
Take me back, Wilksy, when you started. What changes have we seen in your tenure at the Tigers Academy? Because, and let me give you the context, because I'm paraphrasing, but quoting the chairman, the academy was in parts neglected for some time. Now, I'm not asking you to comment on the time before you arrived, but what have you implemented? What have you seen? Because I will follow it with a question around what changes you have to make when head coaches change, and that's happened in your tenure too. But look, if it was neglected prior to you and part of you coming in was to revamp and re-energize the academy and its connection to the senior team, what have we seen in your tenure? Because you have won those 3 titles. Let's not pretend you haven't. What have we seen?
Look, and I say I don't know what was here before my tenure. I don't think there was ever a case where the players or the development was neglected.
Yeah.
I do think the one thing I've changed, and we've worked hard to grow relationships and partnerships with those schools, and probably understanding that we cannot do it alone. We haven't got the capacity, the knowledge, the network to just do it with a couple of staff alone. We need to work in partnership with education providers, with the club, with counties, with schools. You know, we need that network. We need their eyes and ears to get the right players into the system and to develop those players. You know, so we cannot be coach and teacher and parent and uncle and everything to those players. We need to be coaches and developers. And we need to work well with their teachers and their educators and their house parents if they're boarding, and their parents as well, and all the things. We need to develop them through really good networks, rather than just trying to keep it. So that's probably the biggest change. And I think we said before about not going all in too early, and I think that's been the other change. It's just probably being quite patient with some players, understanding that they're going to grow and mature at different rates and need different challenges and different levels of support. So, and then that's the other part to it, and that's been good to see. You know, you take some of those examples, like, you know, George hasn't always had an easy ride. He's always been a good player, but hasn't as an easy ride. And there's been some certain times where we've had to be really challenging with him, and also really supportive. Same with someone like Jack Van Portfleet, who we knew was a good player, but was going to mature slightly later and needed some time to grow and play and develop, and then he's really accelerated. Probably Oliver Chesham as well, another good example of really late maturing, really late developing. When he got it right, kicked on very quickly, but and we're there to catch that in. So I think that's been the other change that's worked well for us, is just understanding and knowing when we've got a good player, but that they're not all the same. We need to be really flexible and adaptive to how we catch them in, I guess.
You talk about George, and we touched on George, and it's lovely, but I think you forget, while he's played Test rugby and he's maybe the headline of the young kids at the point of, you know, globally, he's only played 8 or 9 senior games. Then you've got guys like, you know, Freddie Stewart, I think, is 25 games in now to a senior career and making a fullback jersey his own. Yeah, it's never safe, but he's making his own at the moment and earning his place in the team. You've got guys like Jack Van Portfleet's, I think, played the 19th or 18th ridiculous, you know, number of games for the club in this current squad. What pride do you get when you think about the fact that, and we were doing the maths earlier, or I was doing the maths earlier, I will take the credit for it, nearly 30 of the current kind of 60 senior blokes have at some point come through your academy. So whether that's Tommy Raffel, Joe Hayes, we talked about Ollie Chesham, you know, people don't realise necessarily Cameron Henderson, Dan Kelly, and then you've got the Freddie Stewarts, the Jack Van Portfleets, you know, Tom Smith, James Whitcomb. I could name all 30. But when you see those guys, from Joe Hayes, who's played 61 games for the senior team, to a guy like James Whitcomb, who's played 3 games, 4 games. What do you think? What's the personal element of pride when you see them go on to do what they're doing?
Definitely proud and glad to play like a small part in that, or any part in that. That's the thing to me. I sat down with quite a lot of the boys you just mentioned there at the start of the season, I went up to Hambo Centre and we said, look, a lot of you boys have had a cap or 2 caps or 3 caps for the first team. Now, some of that is deserved and some of that's literally, let's be blunt, because there's been an injury and you've got on. So great. So we can sit back and say, look, we're getting players who's the first team, but actually, how are we going to get you guys playing 50 times, 100 times, 150 times? Because that's what is my version of success. That's what I want. There's no point, if players are playing 5 times for first team, great. Well, it's probably justified them being in the academy, and they've played some role and been available when needed. But really, the test is, can they play 50 times? Can they be a regular player? So I said this to Tommy Rafael the other day, a while ago. Nothing pleases me more than when that academy tag is dropped. Almost, because it's the first team player. So Tommy Rafael's just a regular first teamer.
Yeah.
Hayes is a regular first teamer. It's come from the academy, but there's not that, or academy graduate or academy kid or recent academy. They're first, and that's fine. They've made it as such. But that's what we want. Is we want those guys sort of performing every single week for the club, and cementing those spots. Not just, oh, he's done well, he's got a cap. We're going to get some of that, but actually that's the real goal for in my mind is getting those guys into regular spots, because that's what the team need. They want, I want a first team with a backbone of academy guys.
Yeah,
through. That's what I see my responsibility as.
When you think about Steve coming in, so in the past 9 months, because this whole series is essentially kind of moving on from all the change we've talked about and looking forward. What's been those kind of identifiable changes from Steve's approach to what, I guess, his expectations, to be blunt, his expectations of you? Is he on that same wavelength of, I want players to come through who, he talks about it. So I'm stealing some quotes of guys who understand what it means to play for Leicester Tigers, who want to go out and play as hard and as tough and just put in everything for Leicester Tigers. And that's all lovely to hear. But realistically, behind closed doors, if you can share it, what's his expectation of you being in that 9-month period he's been here now?
Look, I think there's always been that expectation of players, certainly ones that come through the academy, to really have that passion and drive within the senior environment. I think what Steve's brought is a huge amount of clarity. Mm-hmm. So what his expectations are of players, and I say players, not young players, old players, just players. There's no, you can only do this at 19 and this at 20. But they've got to function at a really high level, and it is a really high bar.
Yeah.
So whilst
we'll pick them if they're ready.
If they can perform, if they're at the level, absolutely. Yeah. Which is challenging. They're challenging, but actually great, because it's very, very clear, which means we can be very, very focused, which means we can then pare that down and target what are the really important factors in a certain position or a certain player, and do everything we can to make sure they're meeting those standards and that level. It's going to take a bit of time. I think that's the thing that probably is probably the most challenging. Is it's not going to happen as quickly as Steve Wilder would like it all the time. But certainly that clarity and that focus is actually really good for us and me. Very, very challenging. But exactly what we need. We need to know exactly what the requirements are. Can we fulfill them in every single position all the time? Maybe not, but we can be really targeted at those spots we can fill, those positions we can fill for many years to come. That's where we can be really targeted now. It's quite exciting to do that.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier slightly, but how impacted. We've had changes in coaches in recent years in particular, probably more than people would want, but
Yeah.
How impacted is your program? Because we don't necessarily think or talk too much publicly, anyone does really, about how a head coach change actually impacts more than just the performance of the first team that weekend, or, you know, those 23 guys that are going out to play for the senior team. There's a huge ripple effect of how it impacts everyone in various departments, but I would suggest the academy too.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the point we just discussed, is if there's a constant evolution of players and styles and I suppose ways of playing, standards of things in the first team, that means some ambiguity and lack of clarity with requirements and styles of play. And ultimately, good players are good players, but there is, when you get to see at that top end, there's significant differences in skill sets for position. You know, in scrum half, there's a certain style and skill sets in scrum halves that the way the first team playing now demand and need, and so we need to make sure that we're pushing those elements at 16, 17, 18, 19, so that they are fit for purpose and the right type of players ready to go and make that transition. So it has that sort of that knock-on effect of when it is unclear, you be a bit more general, a bit more with some of those positions, some of those needs, but when it's really focused and targeted, and certainly at the moment, there's a very, very clear direction and a very, very focused identity to the team. That makes it, really very clear as to what we're looking for and where we need and what spots we need to fill as well long term.
So look, we talked all rugby and everything, and we've probably taken more time than we would have liked, but you're just too interesting for me, Wilksy. You just captivate me. As a final point, COVID, it basically rubbed you out. Let's be honest, didn't it? It completely
personally, or
well, I think it took a toll on us all personally, but physically, I've never been better. But when you when we look at the last 12 months, you have essentially had zero rugby. I'm talking games now. The misconception, I think we've kind of got away from this misconception that your job is to win under 18 league titles. Now, they're lovely and it's great to see the trophies, and creating winners is always nice. However, we've talked a lot in the past, 40 minutes about what your role is and producing players and people, but you've had no rugby. So in the short term, I guess shortest way possible for you, what's next for under 18 and academy rugby now that community rugby is making its slow return?
We're getting there. We're getting there slowly. I had a call this morning with the other academies and the RFU around getting some games across the line in May. So it looks very, very promising now. Look, it's been a brutal season, for a lot of the staff and everybody. We've been pretty fortunate. That actually been able to get out and work and be active. Our approach all the way through has been, what can we do, in a safe way, and respecting that it's not just about us wanting the players to train. That they've got to go back into boarding at schools, and that has a knock-on effect. And if that has a knock-on effect on exams and all those things, so I think we've been optimistic but cautious, and we've actually had some really good development with players, whether it be Zoom, whether it be weekly sessions, whether it be really kind of maximising certain elements at certain times. We've certainly kept that going, and we're in a really good place now, ready to start building up from Saturday. Actually, we're having a bit of a reset session on Saturday to go through literally from the bare bones how we're going to play the game in a month's time. We've got a squad of players fit, ready to go, who have done incredibly well to keep motivated and training in their gardens, in their garages, in parks up to this point, and with us intermittently. Yeah, look, there's been some groups that haven't had a lot of opportunity, but then we've got looking at some games in May for predominantly the under-17s, and then we are getting the under-16s groups off the ground in Easter. We're going to put as many sessions on as we can for those guys in a month. Until the end of the season, get to know those guys as well as we can, and then we've got some big plans for the summer to kind of catch up on some lost time. So lots going on. Really busy next couple of weeks over Easter. We've got multiple sessions every day. We're out and about all over the place. So yeah, lots going on, and also with that, trying to encourage some of the under-15s players back into their clubs. We won't be able to start those DPP groups at under-15, but what we have said is get back playing your clubs, and we'll pick those guys up in the summer and next season.
So while there has been, I guess, development slowed in some senses for some, and opportunities potentially missed, you're heading in the right direction. It looks like you've got a smile on your face again after 12 months of stressing.
Yeah, well, touch wood, we'll get some game time for those guys in May. Yeah,
lovely. Wilksy, I appreciate your time.